Okay. If you're keeping up with the date's kind of optional, but it does help a little bit. Today's January the 8th. Okay, so very first thing we've got is with different, and we're going to kind of back up and do some stuff with just straight linear equations, that kind of thing. And that's going to build us up into some other stuff that we're going to do. But very first thing we've got here is talking about on graphs. So you've got x-intercepts and you've got y-intercepts. The x-intercept, that's where a graph crosses the x-axis. So for that one, that would be this point right here. And if we're talking about the y-intercept, that's where you cross the y-axis, which would be that point back up here. Okay, so if you're just looking at it, it's really easy. You look at the graph, you see where it crosses the x-axis, you see where it crosses the y-axis. It's going to be that. And when it comes down to these, they're going to ask you to identify the x-intercepts and the y-intercept. So for the x-intercept, we'll just do x-int to keep it short, a little quicker. That was the point where you're going to tell me that this one's at -3. But a lot of times when we're doing these, they don't want it just as a number. They want you to write it as an ordered pair. So we'll probably just do it like this. So if we do ordered pair on that one, that point right there would be at -3, 0. Okay, and then the y-intercept, basically the same thing. That would be up here at the point that's 4. But again, a lot of times they're not going to let you just put a number. So if you did this ordered pair, that would be here. That would be 0, 4. Okay, so just a little bit of graphing review, just to remember that again, x is always going side to side. The y value is always up and down, so we're going to go side to side first, and then the up or down second to get those. The x-intercept. When we're doing these, a lot of times when we're doing this one, they call it, if we're doing like equations and we're going to solve these, a lot of times that's a solution because that's the answer to whatever question it is that we're working with. And sometimes when they talk about graphs, when they talk about it being an x-intercept or y-intercept on those things, that a lot of times the x-intercept, they also sometimes just call this a root. So that's kind of a, there's some other answers too they throw at you, but that's just kind of the ones we're looking at right now. So it could be a solution, it could be the answer, it could be the root. It's the answer to the problem that we're looking for. Okay, and a lot of times with these equations, they're going to ask us to solve these equations and do some stuff with it, but they're not going to ask you, they're not just going to give you a line. They're going to say, all right, here's an equation like this, and they're going to ask you to find out what the x or the y-intercept is. And for the x-intercept up here, it says to find the x-intercept, you basically set y equal to 0. And then for the y-intercept, you do the opposite. You're going to set x equal to 0. Okay, so for these problems. Okay, so to do that, basically here's what you can do for this one. We'll just kind of do it over here to the side. So for that equation, if they tell you to find out what the x-intercept is, means you're going to plug in y equals 0. Okay, so for that equation, we're going to do 0 for the y value. And leaves you with -2x plus 5. Okay, and then from there, now we're back to just like regular solving equations like we were doing with some of the bell ringer stuff. We're trying to get the x by itself, so we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. And then we're going to divide both sides, kind of running a rim here. We're going to go back and divide both sides by -2. Okay, so we get x would be 2.5. Okay, and again, they probably are going to ask us to do that like we did back here with ordered pair. So if we're doing the x-intercepts here, I'm going to do over here to the side so we get a little bit more room. We're going to say that's 2.5, 0. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing for the y-intercept, but now when we do the y-intercept, this time we're going to plug in x equals 0. Okay, and sometimes people have gotten there before and they're like, well, I forget which one's which. And I'm like, well, if you don't remember which one's the x-intercept and which one's the y-intercept, that's fine. Just realize that one time you're going to plug in y equals 0, and when you do that, x is the only thing that's left, so that will make it the x-intercept. When we plug in 0 for x over here, because we got y, it's going to equal -2 times 0 plus 5. Now the x is gone. The only thing that's left is that's going to be a y value. So if y is the only thing left, then it has to be the y-intercept when it comes off that one. Okay, so the x-intercept was 2.5 comma 0. So for the y-intercept there, it's going to be 0, 5. Okay, and a lot of times with that one, and this is what we'll do down here, when they give you those questions like this, they're going to ask you to graph, because sometimes the way an equation is written, it may not be the easiest thing in the world to graph it the way it's written. So that's why they'll ask you to go back and maybe find the intercepts and go from there. So. All right, everybody okay with that part of it so far? Again, just plug in 0 for x, plug in 0 for y, and then we've solved those two different things to find the two different points. Okay, so for number 1 down here, same thing. Just different problems. We're going to do the same thing, though. We're going to get the x-intercept and then the y-intercept. Okay, so for x-intercept, again, that's going to be y equals 0. We're going to take this equation we got here and take out the y and plug in 0. Okay, good thing with this one is when you plug in the 0, it's 5x minus 0, which means that doesn't really do anything. So it's just 5x equals 5, because x equals 1. Right. And sometimes and again, we're doing with Math Excel, a lot of these, is that they'll let you just put in a number like that, but most of the time they're going to make you write it as an ordered pair. Again, x is always first, the y will go second. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing over here for the y-intercept. Okay, so taking that equation and plugging in 0 for the x, we've got 5 times 0 minus y equals 5. And again, the good thing is that whenever you do those intercepts, when you plug in 0 for x and 0 for y, it just makes this thing go to 0. And if that goes to 0, it just kind of goes away with the equation. So you're left with negative y equals 5. And again, if that's negative y, we need that to be a positive y. So if we change this sign, we also need to change that sign. So y would be negative 5. Okay. As order pair, again, x goes first, and then your y value goes second. All right, and if they ask you to graph those, then that's what we're going to do. We're going to go over here and just graph those 2 points. So 0 and that, we'll get the y-intercept first. 0, negative 5 means we'll just go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces. And 1, 0, kind of the lines got messed up, but good enough. It gave us the 1 point right there. So that would be 1, 0 right there. And then just to graph the line, just connect the 2 dots, and then we're good to go. Okay, so we'll do one more of those. And again, once we do one more, that's for that part of it, that should be good. And we'll do a couple of little things here. So for number 2 here, same thing. We'll do the x-intercept and then we'll do the y-intercept. Okay, so again, plug in 0 for y. That makes it negative 4x plus 2 times 0 equals 12. But again, if you do 2 times 0, that's just 0. So that'll leave you with, let's get this up a little bit so I see it better. Negative 4x equals 12. So when we divide those two out, we get x equals negative 3. Okay, and again, they probably going to ask for that as a ordered pair. So again, x is first, y second, so that's negative 3, 0. Okay, and then same thing for the y-intercept. This time we're going to plug in x equals 0. So it's negative 4 times 0 plus 2y equals 12. Again, that goes to 0, which if you add 0 to that, it doesn't do anything. It's just 2y equals 12. And then dividing those two, we get y equals 6. Okay, and again, order pair. X is always first, and the y value goes second. Okay, so 0, 6 should take us up here. 1, 2, 6. 0, 6 would put us up here. And then x is negative 3. That line is missing, but it should be somewhere about there because it didn't copy over very well, so it should be somewhere about there. Okay. And then just connect your 2 points, and then we're good to go. Okay, so again, just a little bit of practice of plugging in some numbers. Plugging in, and again, the plugging in zeros, which makes the work a little bit easier because usually it's just going to knock those out. And then plotting some points and doing a little bit of graphing as we're going through this. Okay, and then one thing we're going to do, backside. There's nothing on the backside, but we're going to add in a few things here just to go back and show you a few stuff with this one. Because we're talking about slope. We're talking about a lot of things that's here. We haven't actually done anything with it. So let's do this. We're actually going to find the slope back here. Okay, and the way they set this up is usually when they give you points, they're going to give you 2 points. The first one will be x1 and y1. Second point will be x2 and y2 because basically the ones means this is the first point, the twos is that's their second point. Okay, and the formula that they always give to you in the book is basically that, where you subtract the x's on the bottom and the y's on the top. Now, not for some reason they never tell you this one, but to me it works a little better. I always like putting the first things first and the second things second one. So on this one, you can use that equation, or you can also do this one where you do the y1 first and the y2 second, and the x1 first and the x2 second. Then a lot of problems, when we go through the problems on this one, you're going to see me use this one because and this is just from what I found for me, I mess up these problems less if I put the first numbers first and the second numbers second. For some reason, when I start putting this one over here and kind of crossing them up a little bit, I get lost a little bit sometimes. So to me, it just helps me out if I put the first numbers first and the second numbers second. It just lines up for me a little bit easier that way. So. Now, which one you use, it doesn't matter. If you use this one, you'll get the exact same answer. But for me, I kind of like now where I use this one instead. That comes off of it. So. Okay, so for example one, here's what we're going to do. Let's get to this. Let's say it's going to be 7, -2 for the first order pair. And then 5, 4 for the second order pair. Is just make sure you label these correctly. If this is your first point, make sure you label that as X1 and Y1. Because a lot of times people will miss this question, not because they do the math wrong, they just put the wrong labels on the wrong points when they're going through this one. If this is a second point, this is going to be X2 and Y2. Okay, so if we plug it in again, I'm going to go with this formula because to me this is the one I tend to do better with. Is the X's and Y's are going to go first from the first point. So that means it's going to be on top, -2 minus Y2, which is 4. And on the bottom, it's going to be X1 minus X2. Okay, and you may be saying, why'd you do that minus in a different color? Well, it didn't show up on this one, but on the next one that we do, it'll come in here. So for this one, this is, and again, if you're using calculators, this is where you can do a two-part problem. On the top part, you just punch in -2 minus 4. Comes out to be -6. And then on the bottom, it's just 7 minus 5, which is 2. Okay, if you got -6 over 2, that's one where you would simplify it down, divide those two numbers, that comes out to be just -3. Okay, so for example 2, and throw in a few more negatives because the extra negatives seem like it always throws everybody off just a little bit. Because it does complicate things just a little bit. Okay, so we got 4, -3, -6, -8. And again, just to be on the safe side, make sure we label everything correctly. That's our first point, so that's X1, Y1. That's our second point, X2, Y2. Okay, now here's why I like to put those minuses in a different color. So for this one, it's Y1, it's the first Y minus the second Y. And then it's the first X minus the second X. And the reason I put those is that way you can see that you've got a minus and negative, so it's almost like one of those if you want to do this with that number. That the first number, it's not a big deal, but because that second number, it's a subtraction. If it's a negative number, you want to put that negative number in parentheses, so to kind of stand out there. And that way it's -3 plus 8 when you do that minus negative. This one becomes 4 plus 6. Okay, and then you've got -3 plus 8, or if you do it backwards, it's 8 minus 3, which means that's going to be 5. 4 plus 6 is 10. And then in the simplifying part, you can divide both of those by 5, which, again, you don't have to show the work. I'm just kind of writing it out here for us. And you make that 1/2. for example 3. It's got a couple more to go, then we'll be good. We got 4, -5, and then 4, 12. Okay, so there's x1, y1, there's x2, y2. All right, so on the top, we've got x1, 4, -5, y2 goes on the top, that goes on the bottom. So it's -5 minus 12 with the y's on top. On the bottoms, it's 4 minus 4.